Super spooky stories for kids. Horror on the high seas. Introduction. It is sunset along the shore. The lapping of the waves is calming. The sand feels crumbly under your toes. The sky gets darker. Soon, it will be too dark to see clearly. The water could be hiding any number of secrets. Anything could be out there. People like to hear and tell scary stories. A scary story at sea is even better. The ocean is huge. Parts of it are still a mystery, even today. Being in the deep end of the pool can be a little scary. Being hundreds of miles in the middle of the ocean can be terrifying. Mysterious things could live below the ocean's surface. They could float above the waves. They could even come walk among us. Bringing stories ashore. Traveling by sea has always come with a risk. Sailors could be away from home for months or even years. Sometimes they did not come back at all. Sometimes they saw things that were new. They did not fully understand those things. Instead, they told others what they thought they saw. Then, those stories grew into the spooky stories we know today. Chapter 1. The Mystery of the Sargasso. John Fields was stranded on a tiny island in the middle of the Sargasso Sea. He had been there for an entire week. A terrible storm had wrecked his small sailboat. He had no way to contact anyone for help. He had no way to get off the island himself. John kept busy by fishing. He found coconuts for water. Most of the time, though, John sat and looked out at the sea. He wondered if he would ever be rescued. One day, John saw a dot on the water. It was a ship. It got closer and closer. John yelled and waved his arms. He would be saved. The Bermuda Triangle. The Sargasso Sea and the Bermuda Triangle overlap. The triangle covers 500,000 square miles, 1,300,000 square kilometers of the Atlantic Ocean. The 3 points that mark the triangle are in Puerto Rico, Florida, and Bermuda. Over 200 years, at least 50 ships and 20 aircraft entered the triangle and never came out. People have different explanations for why these boats and planes got lost. Some scientists think underwater gas can cause big waves that sink ships. Other people have spookier explanations. They think people disappear because of aliens or time travel. It's fun to read spooky stories about the Bermuda Triangle. In real life, going on airplanes and ships is very safe. As long as people are careful, they can travel just about anywhere they want. Soon, the ship was near enough to send a lifeboat. John climbed in. The crewmen rowed back to the ship. Aboard the ship, the captain and crew welcomed John. As John walked around, he noticed that things seemed odd. Everyone was wearing strange uniforms. John felt like he was watching an old movie. How could that be? Someone led John into a ballroom. There were tables filled with food. "Eat as much as you like," the crew member said. After a week alone on an island, John was starving. He filled a plate with food. Then he looked around the room. He felt the strange feeling again. Suddenly it hit him. The people on the ship must be having a costume party. Ghost ships on the Great Lakes. The 5 Great Lakes form the largest group of freshwater lakes on Earth. They are connected to each other. They also flow to the Atlantic Ocean. Traders have used them to ship goods since the late 1600s. That's nearly 350 years. More than 6,000 ships have been lost on the lakes. The most famous is the Edmund Fitzgerald. It has been called the Titanic of the Great Lakes. On November 9, 1975, it set sail. Giant waves pushed the ship around. After hours of struggling, the first mate of another boat called to check in. The Fitzgerald's captain said everything was fine. That was the last time anyone heard from the ship. Its wreck was found the next year. All 29 crew members were lost. A ghostly Edmund Fitzgerald has been seen on foggy nights. In 2016, it looked like it was caught on camera. The ship struggles in choppy water before disappearing. "Your costume is wonderful," he said to the woman next to him. The woman looked hurt. "I'm not wearing a costume," she huffed. "This is my favorite dress." John felt bad. He walked back to the bar. He picked up a newspaper to hide his red face. But then he got another shock. The newspaper's date said June 2nd, 1937. "Great props," he said to the bartender. The bartender gave him a strange look. Then he turned on the bar's radio. John heard the man on the radio talk about President Franklin Roosevelt. John could not believe his ears. Frightful fact. The name Bermuda Triangle was first written in 1964. A writer used it in an article in a pulp magazine. Pulp magazines were cheap fiction magazines. They were full of shocking stories meant to entertain readers. The paper was made from cheap wood pulp. Regular magazines were printed on higher quality paper. They were called glossies. John dashed outside. "Quick, tell me, who is the President of the United States?" he yelled. "Franklin D. Roosevelt," a man replied. "Hey, are you okay?" John knew he had to get off the ship. He launched one of the ship's lifeboats. He rowed away as fast as he could. Days later, John was picked up by a fishing boat. He told the fishermen about the strange ship. Franklin D. Roosevelt was President of the United States from 1933 to 1945. The fishermen looked at each other in silence. Finally, one of the fishermen said, "That cruise ship disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle almost 70 years ago. Frightful fact." Atlantis was a huge mythical island that disappeared. Some people believe Atlantis was swallowed by the Bermuda Triangle. Chapter 2. The Loch Ness Monster. In 1960, a young girl named Alice Logan went sailing on Loch Ness with her family. Alice had heard stories about a monster called Nessie that lived in the lake. So when she leaned over too far and fell in, she was terrified. Alice made herself open her eyes. She was deep underwater. Then she saw it. It was a huge swimming beast. It had a long, thin neck. Alice thought she felt a long tail brush up against her arm. It had to be Nessie. Hands reached down and grabbed Alice. Back aboard the boat, she tried to see Nessie again, but she couldn't see anything. Ecology of the Loch. Loch Ness is a lake that is 23 miles long and more than 750 feet deep. It is the second deepest lake in all of the United Kingdom. The soil around the lake is full of a plant material called peat. This makes the lake very dark and hard to see in. The water is cold all the time. It is around 41 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, but the lake never freezes over. It could be the perfect place for a big water creature to survive. The Loch Ness Monster was first spotted more than 1,400 years ago in the year 565. Thousands of people have seen things in the lake since then. But the idea of Nessie really caught the world's attention in 1933. A couple said they saw something that looked like a whale. A newspaper printed their story. The next year, the most famous photo of Nessie was taken and printed in a newspaper. It showed what looked like a long-necked creature in the lake. Other photos and videos have been taken. Many trips have been made to the loch. Scientists have come from all over. High-tech tools have been used. Every year, tourists spend more than $55 million for a look at the loch. Still, no one has ever found Nessie. Is Nessie a real creature who lives in the deep? Or are the pictures just one big trick? Frightful fact. In 1994, people found out that the famous picture of Nessie taken in 1934 was fake. Some men had built a neck and head to look like a sea monster. It was only about 12 inches tall. They attached the neck and head to a toy submarine. Then they took the picture. What kind of creature is Nessie? Experts have many ideas. Some think Nessie could be a type of whale or seal that no one has ever seen before. Maybe Nessie is a huge fish. Another idea is that Nessie is an ancient reptile called a mosasaurus. Scientists always thought the last one died millions of years ago. But maybe they have just lived in the lake for all these years. In 2019, scientists took many samples of the lake. They found a lot of signs that eels lived in the loch. Maybe Nessie is a huge eel. If this mysterious creature exists, it knows how to hide well. Will Nessie and her family members ever reveal themselves to us? Frightful fact. Scotland is full of other mythical Nessie-like creatures. The Stour worm and the worm of Linton are long, snake-like dragons. Kelpies are mysterious water horses. Sometimes they can appear as humans. Chapter 3. The Selky Child. Martin tied his fishing boat on the dock and began to walk home. Near the shore, he found a baby wrapped in a sealskin. He had heard tales about selkies. They could change from seals to humans by stepping out of their skins. Martin brought the baby home to his wife Selah. They named her Morgan. Martin did not tell Selah that Morgan was a selkie. He kept the baby's little sealskin in a trunk in the attic. Morgan grew up to be a beautiful child. Selah and Morgan spent the days swimming while Martin fished. One day, though, Martin did not return. Later, pieces of his ship washed up on the beach. Seeing a selkie. Stories about selkies have been told in Iceland, Scandinavia, Ireland, and Scotland for thousands of years. Selkies are a kind of mermaid. The Sami and the Inuit peoples in the Arctic use kayaks made of sealskin. The skin boats were speedy, but they got soggy fast. The boat would start sinking below the surface of the water. Someone from shore would see the top half of a person. They would also see a dark shadow under the water. They might think it looked like a tail. Imagine the kayaker gets out of the boat. Then they pull the soggy skin out of the water. It might look like they took human form and left their seal skin behind. It is no wonder that kayakers could be confused for mermaids or selkies. Later, Selah saw Morgan staring at the sea. "Mama," Morgan said, "do you ever feel like you don't belong here?" "We belong together," said Selah. Suddenly, they heard noises above their heads. They ran upstairs to the attic. An open trunk slid toward them. Morgan reached in and felt something cold and wet. It was a tiny seal's skin. "Come with me," Selah said. She led Morgan down to the basement. She opened a large chest. "I hid this here years ago," she explained. "This is a seal skin. I am a Selky, and now I know that you are too." Selah and Morgan ran to the beach and slipped into their sealskins. As they swam away, Selah looked back. She saw the ghostly figure of her husband standing on his phantom boat. Frightful fact: the story of the Selky is an oral tradition in Scotland. Oral traditions are passed down from one generation to the next. They are stories or knowledge told aloud. The stories help people remember the past without writing it down.